Oh, it's you again. Welcome back. Huh? Oh no.
Oh, hi, I'm Marc. Once upon a time, I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, and now I teach art for a living. In this episode of my YouTube art school series, we're gonna talk about art blocks, specifically how to recover from an art block when it happens, and how to avoid them in the first place, based on science and psychology. I think the answers will surprise you. Oh no, quickly, let's get this class started! Alright, class is in session. Pay attention. When's the last time you had an art block? Maybe you have one right now. Today, I'll try to explain why they happen and how you can get out of it for good. Creativity is like a muscle. Nobody is born creative. Also, just like a muscle, it can fail when you don't exercise, don't feed it proper nutrients, or overwork it. There's just a lot of different things that go into creativity, and they all have to be going well, or creativity gets hurt. You gotta nurture it. When you don't, you're likely to get what we artists usually refer to as an art block or a creative block. Uh-oh. So what are these things? How do we make sure we keep our creativity healthy so that we can keep creating? Well, the creative process has long been explained in 4 stages. These are the stages that you want to look out for and make adjustments to if you ever find yourself with an art block. This applies to any creative process, by the way, not only art. And those stages are preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. And I'll explain each of these real quick because I'm sure you're confused just like me the first time that I heard them. But you'll see, it makes a lot of sense and you'll be able to relate right away. Then I'll give you tips for each on how to best tackle them to avoid art blocks or get out of one. Meanwhile, in the background, I'll be playing a time lapse of recent drawings so that you have something to look at if the topic doesn't interest you, if you're too cool. Win-win. All right, let's get started with the first stage of the creative process. Preparation. Preparation is like your initial planning for whatever project you're about to tackle, big or small. If it's a drawing of a character, for example, at this stage, you're laying down the constraints that you'll be working around. Like it has to be a male character of, whatever age. You're essentially trying to build a background story for it to have some context in which to draw it. If it's in a professional environment, what are the requirements for the projects? What are some design elements that he must have? If it's personal art, well, think about it the same way. Can you maybe make him fit within the world of a previous character that you've drawn before, so you have some context? What kind of style are you going for? This is when you gather references and understand what kind of problem you're trying to solve. Incubation is the second stage. This is where you let it all brew in your mind. You stop thinking about it and go do something else that's unrelated. Preferably something that doesn't require you to focus on anything. It can be quick or it can be long. It can be just going to get a snack or taking a nap, going to the gym to lift some iron, maybe going to walk your dog or your guinea pig, whatever. You have to disconnect for a while. Let your subconscious take over for a moment. Illumination is the third stage. That's when you get those flashes of ideas in your mind. Maybe you just thought about a cool shape for the character's chest plate, or maybe a cool color combination for his outfit. Maybe you saw something out on a walk and it gave you an idea for the shape of his weapon. Whatever it is. Again, this process can happen very quickly if you're used to going through these stages a lot, or it can take a while. Verification then is the final step. That's when you go back to your desk or whip out your sketch pad and try drawing or sculpting or painting what you just thought about. Whatever your medium is, you test it out, verify if the idea that you had actually looks cool once you put it down on paper. Now this whole process should feel familiar to most of you. Although it might not have been broken down this way before, you still most likely went through these exact stages many times before if you've ever created anything. Maybe it was all within the span of a few minutes, or maybe it took days in some cases. Now again, the reason I'm mentioning those 4 stages of the creative process is because somewhere along the way, things can go wrong. Maybe you've skipped some of these stages. Maybe you haven't spent enough time on each or on some of them. And when that happens the first time, it sucks a little bit, but we move on, right? Maybe you'll be annoyed that you can't come up with something that looks good for your character armor. Or maybe you'll feel that no ideas at all come to you when you're about to start drawing. Or maybe you'll have the idea, but the last stage when you put it down on paper won't look like what you imagined. Sounds familiar? Sounds familiar to me. Again, if it happens once in a while, it's right. Sucks, but it's not the end of the world. It happens to everyone. The problem though is if this happens too often. If every time you try to create something, you end up frustrated, you'll stop trying. If you do something and you get hurt, your brain sends you a message next time to avoid doing the right. Seems logical. That so that you don't get hurt. That's essentially what it is being in an art block. It's your brain sending stress signals when you're about to do something that you've repeatedly experienced as being hurtful, physically or mentally in our case. So, how do we fix it? How do we get ourselves out of this predicament? Well, first of all, being aware of how and why this happens in the first place is already helpful. When something makes no sense to you, how the heck are you supposed to fix it? Now that we're all aware of the creative process, I think it'll be easier to pinpoint where the issue is and start addressing it. You first have to recognize which stage of the creative process has been problematic, or which stages if there are many. To wrap up this class, I'll go over each of the 4 stages again, but I'll give you what I think are the most important tips for each to ensure the process flows nicely, to ensure that you don't get stuck as much. Most of these are inspired by neuroscientists like Adam Gazzaley and Andrew Huberman, but they're tips that I've also found myself applying and have helped me avoid art blocks for years now. Start applying these tips and you should never get an art block again. Hopefully. If you're in an art block right now, start applying these tips and you should be able to un-art block yourself. So, at the preparation stage, the first stage of the creative process, come in with a plan. I always recommend my students work on projects. It's all about having context for the art that you're about to create. You could be working on a lineup of characters, part of the same world, or drawing different locations for that same world. Set boundaries. If not a project, well, come up with a background story for your character, for your environment. You want to work within a defined context because the opposite is a lot more stressful. I'm sure you've stared at a blank canvas before where you could technically draw or paint anything, but that infinite number of things that you could draw made you freeze and you couldn't get yourself to start anything. Limit the scope of what you're about to create. Set self-imposed guidelines. Also, be aware of your skills to execute the plan. Make absolutely sure that you're not tackling an overwhelming project or you'll be sure to fail in the final stage when the time comes to execute it. Plan something that's well within your comfort zone for the most part, with only some aspects that are challenging. Something like 70% within your comfort zone and 30% outside. Very important. Don't set yourself up for failure at the first stage. Next, at the incubation stage, walk away. Huh? Many of you, I'm sure, skip this stage, but it's crucial to the creative process. After you've set the guidelines for the art, defocus. Let yourself get bored. This is so important. Creativity is a way for the brain to entertain itself when it's bored, but you have to give it some time to get there. Avoid distractions as much as possible. Don't start playing a game, don't open Netflix, leave social media alone for a while. The less experienced you are, the more important this step is, and usually the longer it will need to be. Another thing you can do is start a different project, move on to something else for a bit. And then sleeping is also another great way to tackle the incubation stage. Then at the illumination stage, that's when you get the idea. Something sparks in your mind and the solution to your problem is found. It's the light bulb moment, the aha moment, when something clicks. The main thing to understand here is that you can't force it. You have to wait for it to happen. Sometimes for a very long time. Don't give up. At this stage, a lot of you, I'm sure, will just tap out and get annoyed. It's the stage where perseverance is most important, and while you can't force an idea to come to mind, there are a number of things that you can do to help. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but consuming art helps massively at this stage. Seek aesthetic things. Look at beautiful scenery, watch a show with cool character designs, a cool style, read some comics, watch a movie. Think back to what got you into arts in the first place. What were you doing? When did that spark first light up? Try doing more of that again. For me, for example, it was just reading manga, looking through video game art books, and watching anime with great character development and style. Also, I often look online for cool art by other artists. So what is it for you that sparked that love for art the first time? Then finally, at the verification stage, you draw, you paint, you put down on canvas the idea that sparked in the previous stage. This is going to be the hardest for a lot of you, where you just won't be able to draw the cool thing that you imagined, and that can be very demotivating. For this to go smoothly, think back to the first stage and make sure that you're not challenging yourself with a project that's beyond your capacity. But it's okay to struggle a bit here. That's normal. Seek help if you must. Post on art forums or art Discord servers to get other people's opinion, to get feedback. Find tutorials to help with execution. Use references. Find maybe a mentor if you can afford it. As many of you know, I built a complete art education program, and the whole point of the program is that by the end of it, students should be able to draw anything they can imagine. Give that a shot maybe. It's already helped thousands of students. And by the way, you can use the coupon in the video description to get a huge discount on the full program. Valid until the end of the month only. You hear me? Anyways, I think an important thing to keep in mind at this final stage is to give yourself enough time. Don't rush. Don't look at the clock thinking you need to be done in X amount of time. Setting time constraints has been shown in many studies to crush creativity. Remember, you can't force it. The last stage is also not the finish line. It's called the verification stage for a reason. Sometimes you'll come to realize that the idea just wasn't that good after all. So just restart the creative process from the beginning with the knowledge of what didn't work and prepare better. The more often you repeat this, the faster it will go, the easier it'll be. Don't try to take shortcuts though, or you'll be stuck with another art block. Nobody wants that. And well, this is going to wrap it up for this week's class. Hope this helps. If you have art block stories of your own and how you got out, maybe you have other tips that I haven't mentioned here that helped you, please share them below. I think many others could stand to benefit. Also, now would be a good time to pay the class fee of either 1 like or 1 sub if you haven't already. All of this knowledge isn't free. Nothing is free. Well, except my brush set. If you want the brush that I use for my drawings here, lucky you, you can grab it as part of my free brush set. See the link in the video description. And I'll see you next week for another YouTube Art School episode.
Huh? Oh no.